And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, having a conversation with Benjamin Bergen. He is president of the Council of Canadian Innovators. Benjamin, some other areas that I think you've highlighted with your organization is critical minerals. So, obviously, Canada wants to value add on that, but we have this obviously deep vein of various critical minerals that could be helpful to America and elsewhere. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, much like our sort of oil and gas industry and other, mining sectors, this is going to be the fuel and the real opportunity for the future and where things are growing. And I think, we as a country have to make a decision about if we are just going to be, the jurisdiction where these, minerals are pulled out of, or are we actually going to be the ones that are refining them and converting them into higher yield products and actually use them to build some of our industries that we're, discussing earlier, things like semiconductors, which obviously require, certain metals and certain things that we have, in the ground here in Canada. And so, I think as we sort of march forward, critical minerals is one area, but there is opportunities to then plug that into greater value chains. So, electric vehicles is something that, for the last 2 years, we saw ministers provincially and ministers federally, sort of tout as this really great opportunity for Canada. And, none of those companies that were given money, whether it be, Volkswagen or Stellantis or others, are actually headquartered here in Canada. And so
Right.
ultimately what we've done is we've created a job strategy where we are bringing in or maintaining some jobs, which look, I'm not going to say that that's not important, but the real value add is actually in the selling of those automobiles and the IP and the data. And so if in essence, all we're doing is allowing for the critical minerals that we have within our earth to go to, Honda and Volkswagen, rather than actually figuring out how we can plug ourselves into the value chain, whether that be, batteries that we help create and actually own some of the intellectual property, or figure out other mechanisms and things like software. Ultimately, the real benefit for all of this will go back to countries of origin. And yet again, we'll find ourselves, with the short end of the stick when it comes to, the economic opportunities that we have in this country.
Quick question for you. Is globalism dead?
I think the economic reality that we had found ourselves for the last 70 years is obviously dramatically transforming. I think the narrative around sort of, free liberal economic trade, I think is definitely finding itself, struggling. And economic nationalism, I would say, has returned in sort of a large way. I think, what we're seeing south of the border with, President Trump is a combination of a new ideology or maybe a rebirthed ideology around economic nationalism. And candidly, I think a blatant, play for power, right? I think, at first it was concerns around drugs and concerns around, illegal crossings from Canada that sort
Right.
of spurred, the claim of this tariff. It doesn't seem like there's any way that that can be, satiated regardless of what we do and put on the border. And so, the economic challenges that we find ourselves in, you know, conclude that we've got to come up with better ways of generating wealth and prosperity because, our largest trading partner no longer is playing by the same rules.
Indeed, indeed. I think you also mentioned modernizing governance as one of your topics. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that we've really seen over the last decade has been a failure of federal and provincial governments to modernize. And how do you use technology solutions to create better outcomes for your citizens? Now, that can be in anything from healthcare to education. That could be in anything from, a payment system like, the Phoenix that was used to pay employees from the federal government. And so, what we're really sort of putting forward at the Council of Canadian Innovators is how are you using your procurement dollars to help grow companies, right? If you're, let's say, the province of Ontario and, educate or healthcare is a $200 billion spend, how are you driving efficiencies, but then also procuring solutions that save lives, that create jobs, and ultimately make, quality of life better for, Ontarians and
Sure.
Canadians writ large?
Benjamin, we've run out of time. There's much more to discuss. I hope you don't mind if we invite you back at some point in the future, but thanks for being on the program today.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.